Welcome. You're listening to Temple Talk from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, Israel, united, undivided, eternal capital of the Jewish people. Rabbi Chaim Richman here, together with Yitzchak Reuven. Today is the 15th day of the month of Tevet, 5778. Some people call it the 2nd of January, 2018. Everybody knows that this week we are beginning the second of the 5 books of Moses, Parshat Shemot. It's a new reality, and we descend into the heart of darkness, really. Torah portion opens, tells us the names of the children of Israel that went down to Egypt, and then that generation passed away. And suddenly the tables were turned, and Joseph, who had been the national hero, who had saved Egypt and actually all of the world from extinction, from starvation, somehow a new king arose who didn't know who Joseph was. And within a short period of time, people of Israel were enslaved. And actually what we're reading about in this first Torah portion of the book of Exodus is the first institutionalized genocide program in history. And what we're going to be exploring this week in our Torah portion video is what exile is really all about, the dark side of exile, the nature of exile. Now we're beginning to read about the Egyptian exile, and onto the scene comes Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. And from this point on, with the exception, mysteriously, of Parshat Tetzaveh, as everybody knows, every single Torah portion from this point on until the end of Deuteronomy will feature Moses and his compassion, his singular dedication to his people, his faith in Hashem, his very, very unique relationship with God. All of these factor into the amazing personality and dynamic of who Moshe was. Take a lifetime of study to try and put your finger on who this man was. And that is what is before us now as we begin the book of Shemot. It's raining here, by the way, today in Jerusalem, on and off. Yitzchak wanted me to mention that.
Very important.
It is extremely important.
We need the rain.
As we have mentioned many times, rain for us here in Israel is not like it is for other people in other countries. It's not an annoyance. It's not like something that puts a crimp in our plans. It's not like Karen Carpenter sang "Rainy Days and Mondays." It's like that's some sort of category. Like rainy days and Mondays, they always get me down. Like actually, here, rainy days are such a source of joy. First of all, we're in a terrible drought. It's the 5th year running of drought, and the whole relationship between the land of Israel and rain is very mystical. It's very, very spiritual. It's very, very much a personal, an intimate connection between the people of Israel and their God. The Torah tells us that the land of Israel is different than every other land, that it receives its rain, especially from heaven. And we've had several mass prayer rallies for rain. And my understanding is that the water level of the Kinneret, which is our main water supply, is beginning to rise slowly. And God willing, we should have a lot of life-giving rain.
Amen.
Now, I gotta say, there's a lot in the news that I really relate to and that I really want to talk about. But for some weeks now, we've been spotlighting the commotion, the international hysteria about Jerusalem, about the President Trump's declaration recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, which actually, he said, was just a reflection of the reality of the fact that it is. It's upset a lot of people. And of course, nobody's more upset than the Palestinian Liberation Organization, aka the Palestinian Authority, which feels that this shows that America can't be trusted. And of course, the United Nations, which is a house of lies and deceit, actually voted to condemn the United States in a resolution for their action of recognizing Jerusalem. In the meantime, last week we featured as our special guest star, of course, Guatemala President Jimmy Morales. He's not here today. We do have someone else in the studio, though, who
also recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Yes, we do have someone, a very dear friend in the studio, who is observing how we record Temple Talk today, and he does also recognize Jerusalem as our eternal capital. So a number of nations are following suit. And in fact, today, by the way, I just read that President Trump has instructed his people, whoever that is, to expedite this move. He even wants it to go on to happen this year, to move the embassy to Jerusalem. I got to tell you, in God's perfect timing and his celestial cosmic wink, there was a very big news item this week, and that is, here's the headline I'm reading from a Reuters news brief. Israeli archaeologists find 2,700-year-old governor of Jerusalem seal impression. Mm-hmm. Now, you know that when there's some sort of find dating from the Temple times here in the land of Israel, we get very, very excited. So this is an item from Reuters. It reads, Israeli archaeologists unveiled on Monday a 2,700-year-old clay impression which they said belonged to a biblical governor of Jerusalem. The artifact, inscribed in an ancient Hebrew script as belonging to the governor of the city, was likely attached to a shipment or sent as a souvenir on behalf of the governor, the most prominent local position held in Jerusalem at the time, the Israel Antiquities Authority said. The impression, the size of a small coin, depicts two standing men facing each other in a mirror-like manner and wearing striped garments reaching down to their knees. It was unearthed. Now listen to this, okay, ladies and gentlemen. I'm reading from this Reuters article. It says, it was unearthed near the plaza of Judaism's Western Wall in the old city of Jerusalem. I have never read an expression like that in my life, in any news release. Judaism's Western Wall. I'll get back to that in a few moments. I continue in the article. It supports the biblical rendering of the existence of a governor of the city in Jerusalem 2,700 years ago, an Antiquities Authority statement quoted excavator Shlomit Wexler Bidolach as saying, governors of Jerusalem appointed by the king are mentioned twice in the Bible, in 2 Kings, which refers to Joshua holding the position, and in 2 Chronicles, which mentions Messiah in the post during the reign of Josiah. The Antiquities Authority's announcement came several weeks after U.S. President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, a decision that overturned a decades-old policy on the status of the city and stirred Palestinian protests and international concern. So I'm saying, first of all, I think it's pretty amazing that we have an archaeological find which the whole world is aware of now. It's kind of like may I say, a little bit of a slap in the face to the world, that God is saying, like, oh, you don't believe that Jerusalem is a Jewish city, eh? I mean, and I'll get to this, but I just wanted to say this one sentence. I'm going to expand upon it. I noticed that there was no 2,000-year-old Palestinian clay seal impression that was found, or even a 50-year-old one, or a 60-year-old one, for that matter. Anyway, I wanted to mention this expression that Reuters went out of their way to write in this article, where it was unearthed. It was unearthed near the plaza of Judaism's Western Wall in the old city of Jerusalem. That is so, my blood is boiling. I'm so annoyed at this expression. And you know what it's all about, okay? In other words, Judaism, they have their Western Wall. It has nothing to do with the Holy Temple. It has nothing to do with the Temple Mount. It has nothing to do really with the comprehensive understanding of Jewish presence in this city. It has nothing to do with the Bible, really. In other words,
it's not even necessarily reality. It's a Jewish concept that there's a wall.
Right. So in other words, now exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. The chutzpah, the gall, the audacity, unmitigated nerve of this expression, Judaism's Western Wall. It's like you have these Jews, and they have their wall, and so it's their Western Wall. But what is it a wall of? You know, it's like it's not even have anything to do with Israel. but certainly not with Jerusalem, which stirs Palestinian protest and international concern. It was found in the plaza of Judaism's Western Wall. Anyway, I thought that was really a tickle. And here you have actually at least 2 verses in the Bible. The Reuters article itself is mentioning this position. So here is the oldest proof that's ever been unearthed that there was indeed a governor of Jerusalem. You mean the Bible is true? So it's funny, yesterday I had an interview here in the office with Japanese television.
Yeah.
And the Japanese television crew came, and the moderator, or the how do you say manche? The
MC? He was the interviewer, no?
The host of the program interviewed me, and he tried to drag it into. He wanted some statements from a Jewish perspective about our connection to Jerusalem, why Jerusalem is important to us, how we feel about Jerusalem. I warned him not to put any words in my mouth, and I had to say that again on camera. I said, "You're putting words in my mouth," and I told him not to drag me into anything political. But anyway, he's asking me how I know this about Jerusalem, that it's the capital of the Jewish people, and everything else. So I was referring consistently to the Bible.
Right.
And he kept saying to me, "So, Bible true? Bible true?" First of all, it was a very difficult interview because of the language barrier. He really didn't speak any English at all. And my Japanese is rusty. So he kept saying, "So, Bible command, Jewish people, Bible true?" And he seemed very surprised about that. But anyway, I consider this kind of thing every time it happens like some sort of divine kiss, some sort of divine intervention. And you can't get better than that timing, when the whole world is so obsessed with dividing Jerusalem. I mean, Israel also just this past week officially and formally withdrew from UNESCO.
Right.
UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, okay? And Israel withdrew because Israel has been the butt of abuse. For months now, UNESCO has been condemning Israel, has been either
divesting Israel of all its historical
either diminishing.
Here.
UNESCO has either been diminishing or completely denying the Jewish connection to Jerusalem, to our holy sites. They're the ones who decided to announce that Rachel's tomb is an Islamic site. And certainly they've been announcing for a long time that the tomb of the patriarchs is an Islamic site. And of course that the Temple Mount is an Islamic site. So Israel decided to leave UNESCO once and for all. Listen, there was a really great article I have to mention, written by Jack Engelhard, an op-ed on Arutz Sheva, where and the title of the article was "Even the Beatles Preceded the Palestinians." And he opened the article by talking about the fact that, of course, one of the biggest news items at the close of 2017 was the knighting of Ringo Starr. Long overdue, by the way. So he goes on and talks about a comparison between the Beatles, who actually made their splash on February 7th, 1964, on The Ed Sullivan Show, and the Palestinians, who actually appeared officially in history on June 2nd, 1964, because that is the day that the Arab League certified them. So I mentioned to this Japanese television interviewer that, first of all, I showed him the books that we always like to mention, the guidebooks that were published by the Muslim Waqf, the Supreme Muslim Council. The one that we have, the original from 1930, before the establishment of the State of Israel.
I think.
Well, that states unequivocally that the Temple Mount is the location of Solomon's Temple, and it's beyond dispute. And it says it's the universal belief. But the whole idea of revisionist history, how that terminology was changed every time that booklet was republished, not after 1967, but after 1948, after the establishment of the State of Israel. Anyway, we're in the Torah portion of Shemot this week, introducing the whole concept of Israel and Egypt and the exile and the and the redemption and Moshe. So there's a famous joke. I was trying to remember it, and I couldn't find the original version that I remembered, but I found this on aish.com, where the joke reads, the Israeli ambassador at the UN began, "Ladies and gentlemen, before I commence with my speech, I want to relate an old Passover story. When Moses was leading the Jews out of Egypt towards the Promised Land, he had to go through the nearly endless Sinai Desert. When they reached the Promised Land, the people had become very thirsty and needed water. So Moshe struck the side of a mountain with his staff, and a pond appeared with crystal clean, cool water. The people rejoiced and drank to their heart's content. Moses put down his staff and went to a solitary corner of the pond to drink and meditate in prayer. But once Moses returned, he found that his staff had been stolen. So the Israeli ambassador at the UN said, I have reason to believe, ladies and gentlemen, that the Palestinians stole the staff of our great prophet Moses. Palestinian delegate to the UN, hearing this accusation, jumps from his seat and screams out, this is a travesty. Everybody knows there was no such thing as Palestinians at that time. Anyway,
Yeah.
and I don't digress, but do you realize that on the backside, on the flip side of reality of this archaeological discovery this week, only the latest of many archaeological discoveries that demonstrate the unbreakable bond between the Jewish people and their presence in this city and in this land. You know about the Palestinian Museum?
The one that's never been
Look it up on
completed?
Wikipedia. On Wikipedia, this is what the
It's an
article
empty
says.
museum,
There's
I
a
believe.
Palestinian museum. It's a flagship project of the Welfare Association, which is a nonprofit organization for developing humanitarian projects in Palestine. The museum in Bir Zayt opened on 18th of May 2016. I'm reading word for word from Wikipedia, despite not having any exhibits. Now they have an exhibit. It's the inaugural exhibit called Jerusalem Lives. So this is actually the project of a London-based organization, which is its purpose is to commemorate the Nakba, which of course is the Arabic word for disaster, which is how they refer to the establishment of the State of Israel. And then, and I'm still reading from Wikipedia about the museum, later developed to a broader viewpoint to documenting Palestinian history, society, art, and culture from the beginning of the 19th century. So they decided that they're going to document history, Palestinian society, art and culture of the Palestinian people from the beginning of the 19th century. There are no exhibits. Abbas blames the fact that there are no exhibits on Israel.
Of course.
He says that it's plagued by a series of cost overruns and delays and Israeli customs authorities. But I think the reason that there's no exhibits in the Palestinian Museum is because...
It speaks well of the museum.
It's because there's nothing to exhibit. Exactly.
There is no history.
So now they have an exhibit about Jerusalem because it's focusing on the whole controversy of Jerusalem being declared the capital of Israel. And so if you go to the website of the Palestinian Museum, you can read about the Jerusalem Lives exhibit, and this is what you read there. It says, in light of what Jerusalem continues to face from exclusionary policies enforced by militarization and closure, the Palestinian Museum has created a multifaceted project and exhibition called Jerusalem Lives, which aims to focus on the living aspect of the city in support of its people and examine the city as a case study metaphorically representing globalization and its failures, and to find answers to inspire a better future, and all sorts of stuff like that. The point is, this is a constant theme in our lives here. The whole necessity of constantly having to prove that this is our city, and even now, as I report that 2,700-year-old precious archaeological find has been unearthed that testifies to the uninterrupted presence of the Jewish people in Jerusalem from the beginning of time. It's like the world could care less. The world has absolutely no interest in recognizing that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And because Trump did it, it must be a mistake and it must be wrong.
And
as far as the world is concerned.
So they consider this discovery to be fake news?
Oh, there you go. Fake news. So, Yitzchak, an awkward pause there.
I can get rid of that, so let's not refer to it.
Oh, that's even better. Now, on the political spectrum, there was a very big development about Jerusalem this week as well, because the Knesset passed a special law about Jerusalem, that 2/3 of a majority of the government is going to be required to officially to make any changes whatsoever in Jerusalem. In other words, a new law was passed that if ever a government should arise that would
God
want
forbid.
to relinquish Israeli sovereignty over any portion whatsoever of Jerusalem, it would require a special majority of the Knesset, which is not usually required. And this was adopted as a safeguard so that Jerusalem will forever remain the capital of Israel.
Thank God. Hopefully that will never be necessary. But you never know. Anyway, Rabbi, there's much to talk about still, but we're winding down here. I don't want to start a whole new subject while we're closing up the first half of Temple Talk.
Yes, Yitzchak. Tell me about the amazing figures that have just been released regarding the amount of Jews that have been frequenting the Temple Mount.
In the year 2017, which just concluded, there was a 75% increase in the number of Jews who went up to the Temple Mount in purity. Wow. I think it's 27,000 or something, 25,700 Jews, which is a huge increase. And
actually, the previous year, I think it was something like 15,000.
Yeah, I mean, the previous year was a big increase from the year before that. And as an article in the not very sympathetic Haaretz pointed out, that more and more Jews from all over the spectrum of Jewish life are going up, ultra-Orthodox Jews and students and soldiers, and it's just, it's become the latest thing. Everybody's doing it. And the police have become much more receptive, and
I think it's all part of the spiritual awakening and process of return to Hashem that is going on in the heart of the people of Israel.
Amen.
There's the music. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Chaim Richman here in Jerusalem. Today is the 15th day of the month of Tevet, 5778, the second day of January 2018. This coming Shabbat's Torah reading, Parshat Shemot, the first reading of the second book of the 5 books, the book of Exodus, otherwise known in Hebrew as Shemot, as in names, the names of the 70 Israelites who went down into Egypt. And Rabbi, you've been talking a lot about the news. But of course, there's another big news item that you haven't mentioned yet. I know you want to, and that is the uprising in Iran. And what's that all about? And why are some news outlets covering it and some aren't? And why are some leaders of the democratic world encouraging it, and while others are discouraging it or trying to ignore it?
Well, as far as the encouragers...
that would be one.
You know
that would be two. Trump and Netanyahu.
Do you know that President Trump tweeted as follows: Iran is failing at every level despite the terrible deal made with them by the Obama administration. The great Iranian people have been repressed for many years. They are hungry for food and for freedom. Along with human rights, the wealth of Iran is being looted. Time for change.
Time for change.
So that's been interpreted as he's basically calling for the Iranian people to overthrow their regime, which, by the way, is exactly what they want to do.
Right. Now, I read something somewhere, and someone said, there's 2 words why they're rising up now, and they didn't do it a year ago or 3 years ago or since 2009 when they did have a massive protest after a rigged election, and that protest was ignored and discouraged by the then leader of the free world, Barack Obama, who was in the middle of working out a grand legacy-creating deal for his presidency, which was the nuclear agreement with Iran, which has now left Iran flush with billions of dollars, which is all going to their proxy terrorist organizations here in the Middle East and probably other places as well. But the two words this person said, why they're rising up now, were Donald Trump. Why? Because exactly for what you said, because they feel that there's someone out there now who will respond and provide them with some kind of encouragement and perhaps support. Now, I want to add to that, Rabbi, why Donald Trump and why now? What did Donald Trump do in the past, let's say, month or so that let people in Iran know that he might be a man of his word and he might mean business? And I would say that that is Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, meaning that the uprising in Iran is directly connected to Jerusalem.
Whoa,
because
so you're
Donald
saying
Trump,
it's basically Israel's fault.
Because Donald Trump defied his advisors and defied the current logic of the Western world and politically correct thinking, and came out against everyone and recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the people of Iran said, wait a minute, this guy may be different from the other crop of current leaders who ignore our plight and are busy shaking hands and making deals with our tyrannical leaders. And so now they're stepping up and demanding their country back. So yeah, I bring it all back to Jerusalem. Now, I would like to somehow take that and tie it back into the Parsha, back into the book of back into Shemot, first Parsha of the book of Exodus.
Good luck with that.
Because, again, there was a tyrant in Egypt who was enslaving people, destroying their lives, practicing genocide, something which the current Iranian leadership loves to boast about their plans for Israel, which are genocidal. And he refused to change his way of thinking and his rule even the tiniest bit when Moses went to him and said, 3 days in the desert, that's all we're asking for, 3 days in the desert. That can't be too much to ask for. He would hear nothing of it, which, of course, led to the 10 plagues, which totally turned everything inside out and upside down in Egypt. And, of course, we all know the rest of the story. So we could be onto something big here. May just be one of those, you said a wink before, you know, when talking about the 2,000-year-old seal that was discovered. Well, this might be another type of divine wink. We also always talk about there's always a connection between current events and what we're reading in the Torah portion. And I think this may be a lead as to what's going on. What do you think?
Well, there's no question about the fact that twice a week for many years now, the Iranian regime has been calling for the destruction of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So, from what we are understanding, the people of Iran themselves are rising up, and they're saying that they've had enough. Now, my understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, is that this has to do with money, that this is an economic rebellion, mm-hmm. that it's because the average Iranian is, like Trump said, literally starving for food. Is that the case? Is it about money? And before you answer me, I mm-hmm. just want to go over some figures here. We know that when Iran when the sanctions were lifted against Iran,
Right.
those that were lifted, and Iran was rehabilitated as part of the nuclear deal, we know that $100 billion was given to the regime. And we know also that from that time, hundreds of millions of additional dollars every year are given by the Iranian regime to its proxy militias and armies. And of course, I mean in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon now.
Hezbollah and also Hamas now.
Yes, in fact, for example, in 2016, Iran quadrupled its support of Hezbollah from $200 million to $800 million a year. And this is all money that Obama enabled, that Obama
Yes.
Presented to Iran as part of the package deal, which was to present Iran as fresh as a daisy, smelling like a rose, all those metaphors, completely rehabilitated and joining the international community.
To
And
add
I think,
to
by the
that-
way, I think this has to do a lot with the fact that in fact, not one single serious major European leader has said a word
Not a word.
about what's going on in Iran.
It's not happening. They're too busy.
And the reason for that is
signing new
because of
deals
the
with Iran.
the incredible commerce that is now blossomed between Iran and the rest of the world. And so once again, Donald Trump is isolated, and he is making a point of the rights of the Iranian
Right.
people.
Well, he's not quite isolated because Iran also, as would be expected, blame Israel for instigating
they
this
did, by the way.
uprising,
They're
and
blaming
Netanyahu
Israel.
has responded by saying that's ridiculous. But of course, we support the Iranian people who are our friends, unlike the regime, and we wish them success in their pursuit of freedom.
And the Revolutionary Guards are the ones who control the purse strings
Right.
of all of the money in Iran.
Any benefit that might have gone to the Iranian economy
Right.
goes directly to the Revolutionary Guard, and they own the economy. Now, you mentioned the proxies. There's also the Iranian army, which is all over Syria now, and there's more Iranian forces in Syria than there are Syrian forces in Syria right now. And Iranian forces are moving closer and closer and closer to the northern border with Israel, which Israel has warned against. So the plot thickens. You mentioned before, you asked me a question. I want to respond now about, is this an economic issue? And certainly economics is what seemed to have instigated the uprisings. But the uprisings began in very, very conservative Islamic areas, even holy cities to Shia Islam, where the support for the government has always been very, very strong. And they've spread all over. And yes, I think they are upset about the fact that they're very much aware that billions of dollars have entered their economy, but they're not seeing any of it. So part of their slogans that they're chanting in the streets is we don't care about Hezbollah, we don't care about Palestine, we care about us, we want some attention here. So I think that certain media outlets that have been very supportive of the Iranian deal that was cooked up by Obama, and maybe in the States, also in Europe, are emphasizing, that's an economic issue that
For example,
that the regime can definitely address. However, it's much more than that. They don't
so
want to
here's this
admit it.
ridiculous article in the New York Times, and I quote. It says, even the lifting of economic sanctions under Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with large foreign powers, including the United States, has not unleashed the growth Mr. Rouhani has hoped for, as key sectors of the economy remain under the thumb of obscure powers, including religious foundations and the country's Revolutionary Guards. There is mismanagement and widespread corruption in all levels of the state apparatus. So I don't understand that at all, how the New York Times could write about mismanagement and widespread corruption in all levels of the state apparatus, and Mr. Rouhani had hoped for greater economic growth. The fact is that hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent on the tentacles of Iranian proxies spreading throughout the Middle East. The fact that Israel is basically, believe it or not, on its northern border, now directly in a face-off with Iran themselves,
Right.
is a direct result of Obama's releasing that $100 billion in what had been the sanctions money. And so now the New York Times is writing like, where's the money? What's going on? It's the obscure powers. It's the Revolutionary Guards. It's mismanagement. He had hope for economic growth. My goodness, all of the money that was supposed to reach the Iranian people is being used to finance terror and anarchy and unrest as far as they can reach.
Absolutely. But the New York Times, like many other outlets, don't want to own up to that. And the former members of the Obama administration are having how do you say it? Apoplectic fit. Like, Trump shouldn't say anything. He's just going to ruin it if he says. And of course, he should say something. Since when, is the leader of the free world supposed to remain silent when people are rising up and struggling for their freedom? Of course. You're
referring to Obama's former Deputy National Security Advisor and Strategic Communications Chief Ben Rhodes, his former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and former Secretary of State John Kerry.
John Kerry, who says, my gosh, we don't know what's going on in Iran. We have no idea what's going on. He just made a deal. He was the one who cooked up this deal with Iran, and now he's claiming that we don't really know anything about Iran, so how can we take a stand?
So Obama's Middle East coordinator, Philip Gordon, actually stated outright in an op-ed in the New York Times on Saturday, he called on Trump, quote, to keep quiet and do nothing in response to the protests. I guess that's the American way.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that Donald Trump can't do is keep quiet, so...
So we don't have to worry about that.
Don't have to worry about that, yes.
I just have one more thing to say about the New York Times today. I mentioned earlier in the broadcast that the government here in Israel now has just passed a special bill, and it's become law, about sovereignty in over Jerusalem that would require a special two-thirds majority, which is not usually required for a government decision, again, in order to transfer any area whatsoever under the municipality of Jerusalem, or however it's being drawn, in any future deal whatsoever. In other words, it's a special safeguard to strengthen our sovereignty in Jerusalem. Another political development this week, almost simultaneous to this passing of the Jerusalem law, was that in the Likud's Central Committee, which is not a governing body, but is the governing body of the Likud party, which is the governing party,
senior party.
But in their Central Committee of members, they also passed a resolution,
unanimously,
a unanimous resolution, which was the meeting was not attended by the Prime Minister, but they're touting the fact that he didn't call it off, or he didn't make them cancel it. But they passed a unanimous resolution calling for the annexation of particular areas of Judea and Samaria. And of course, this is 60 some odd years overdue, and it's calling for the declaration of the sovereignty of the State of Israel over the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria. So he listened to this headline from the New York Times. Okay, I told you these are the two items that this headline I'm about to read to you are relating to: the Jerusalem law that would require a special two-thirds majority before the possibility of relinquishing any Jewish control over Jerusalem. That's a law whose time has come. And this non-binding resolution of the Likud Central Committee, which is non-binding in a governmental way whatsoever, but it certainly shows the spirit and the direction of the Likud membership, which will indeed hopefully have a direct influence on the decisions of the Likud if it's a ruling party. Here's the headline of the New York Times. Israeli right presses moves to doom two-state solution.
The two-state solution.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're all genuflecting around this God, this image of this, and it's so pagan, and it's so lewd, this two-state solution. And this is how they relate to the internal affair of the Israeli public, of Israeli policy, of our connection to our city and our 2,700-year-old clay seal, and the biblical heartland of our land.
And our half
Israeli
a million citizens who live in that biblical heartland.
Right. presses, say that again.
And there are 500,000 citizens that live in that biblical heartland who
Right.
don't enjoy all the rights that other Israeli citizens do because they are over the so-called Green Line. Yes, continue.
And what is the first paragraph of the first sentence of the news item, which is the only one I'll read? After President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's party has seized momentum to strengthen Israel's rule of the West Bank.
They don't know who to blame first thing. Was they blame Netanyahu? They blame Trump?
Seized momentum to strengthen Israel's rule of the West Bank.
Oh.
These people are just incredible.
You know, the New York Times were covering what we're reading about now in the Torah readings, right? About the Moses, Pharaoh, Exodus. First of all, it would all, Jews rise up for economic reasons. Second of all, the plagues, climate, global warming, I don't know what. They would come up with all sorts of things. Moses is stirring trouble. He met with the elders, and they have
there's actually there was a famous parody that was done of the New York Times covering the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Yeah.
I think it's online, and this is exactly what they did in this parody. But the point is, Israeli right press's move to doom two-state solution.
Right.
I would hope that the two-state solution is doomed, because the two-state solution, which is like a love of the New York Times, like some sort of ideal, is that sentence, two-state solution, that expression is tantamount to calling for the complete destruction of the state of Israel, because that's what it would be.
Even, by the way, even the Palestinian Authority keeps saying that the two-state solution is finished, and that, they recalled their ambassador to the United States, and they're protesting everything, and there's no need to talk. I mean, again, nobody ever gives credence to what they say when they say they want to destroy Israel and they support terror. And now they are saying all the time that there's no two-state solution. It's dead. I'm sorry, New York Times. Like, write an obituary already. You're good at writing obituaries, New York Times. Write an obituary. Two-state solution is dead. You've prepared. The obituary writers always have something prepared for people who are famous, and they're going to go someday.
Right, and they probably have something in the drawer, in the top drawer for Israel, that they've just been itching to be able to play as a front page, as a headline, as a banner headline. They can't wait to be able to announce that Israel is dead. But
I'm sure they haven't written anything
that isn't going to happen.
Two-state solution.
It's just not going to happen, and the Torah cycle reading proves that. And we go down into exile, and then we go out, and then we deliver the light of Torah and the presence of Hashem to the whole world. And that's exactly what they resent the most, and that's what Jerusalem is all about, and that's what the Holy Temple is all about. And now, from this point on, fasten your seatbelts. As we read the book of Exodus, we're going to go from darkness to light. We're going to go and we're going to build the tabernacle in preparation for the permanent Holy Temple. Everything is going to be centered around the Torah, around the Ark of the Covenant, and the message of Israel goes out into the world. It's exactly what's happening right now, in little baby steps, like making a law that recognizes that Jerusalem is the capital, like making a law that Jerusalem can't be abandoned, like suggesting that in fact the rest of Eretz Israel, Judea and Samaria, is also ours. This is the way that the light is returning to the world.
Amen. And it's raining. I know you mentioned that, but it's always a good thing. So when it's raining, it means good things are happening. People are going up to the Temple Mount. All these are, like you said, maybe baby steps.
There was an interview with Rabbi Ariel that we posted. Our own founder of the Temple Institute, who said, "Why are you all making a special prayer rally to ask for rain? If only you would make a prayer rally to say that we need to build the Holy Temple, then rain would be automatic."
That's what he said, and I think he was quoting also from the prophet Haggai, who said, "Why are you sitting in your finely furnished houses?" I'm paraphrasing. When God is not in his house.
Basically, he was saying, what are you worried about the rain for? What do you expect when you're not making any effort or showing any interest in building the Holy Temple?
But we are showing an interest, and we are making an effort, and the fact of the matter is that not just the resurgence of Jews going up to the Temple Mount, but the Holy Temple is something, you can be walking down the street and people are talking about it. I mean, sitting on a bus and people are talking about it. You turn on the news and somebody has a story about it. I mean, it didn't used to be that way, Rabbi. We used to be the only ones that people would give you a look. Like,
they said we were crazy.
Yeah, they thought we were oddballs from America or something. But no, now everybody's talking about it. Anyway, it's been great. And I know that music is going to start in just a few seconds. So, Rabbi, what would you like to say? One last sentence to wrap things up before I sign off
I
here.
would like to say that I hope that everyone is having just such a wonderful and blessed and light-filled week. And as the days start to become imperceptibly longer, slowly, we move towards redemption.
Amen. And with that, dear listeners, we conclude another episode of Temple Talk. Thanks for being with us, Temple Talk.